Welcome, everybody, to another edition of Spotlight on Addiction and Recovery. I'm your host, Scott Jones. I want to thank everyone for joining us today. I hope everybody is doing well as we are coming into, nearly the spring season. Baseball is almost back. Everybody's having a good time, and I hope you guys are enjoying it. And my friends up north, it will stop snowing, I hear, somewhere around June. So hang in there. You're going to be fine. For today, I'm really excited. Every once in a while you come across somebody who is just not only, you know, certainly there's some celebrity status and some other things involved, but just somebody who is so um, dedicated to helping people and so just has such a great goal and direction in their life that they have this energy that you just want to be around. And that person, I met this person a while back, maybe a couple years ago, the first time I met him, and then we've been lucky enough to cross paths again several times. This is Randy Grimes. I'm going to bring him in right now. Randy, how are you, my friend?
Hey, I'm good, man. Thanks for this opportunity. I love your studio.
Well, thank you, brother. Appreciate it. Appreciate it, man. I mentioned celebrity. You are a professional, or what would you say, an ex-professional football player, or a retired professional football?
I think I qualify for former, ex, well, whatever you want to say. But no, I had a great career in Tampa, and I'm grateful for that opportunity to play there too for a decade.
Yeah, I get a little confused because when you've been married as many times as I am, the word ex is not a good word,
Well, practice makes perfect, right?
Yeah, we would hope so. We would hope so. So you play with Tampa Bay. Is this your hometown? Is this where you kind of like everything started for you, or did you kind of end up in Florida?
Yeah, I did. Well, I got drafted by the Bucks, and that's how I got to Florida. I'm from a small town right outside of Dallas, Texas, called Tyler, the rose capital of the world. That's where Earl Campbell's from. And he was the Tyler Rose. I was the Tyler Poison Ivy, probably, or something. But no, I got to Florida by being drafted by the Bucks, and man, instantly became a Florida guy. I love it out here. I live in St. Pete now, which is right outside of Tampa. And, I still get to hang out with some of the guys I played with and some of the relationships I made here back in the 80s and early 90s. So it's kind of cool.
But your life has taken quite a different direction from football. I think I think it's actually in your contract when you're finished playing football, you're either supposed to open a restaurant or a car dealership. You didn't do that. You've decided
to mattress store.
Right? Yeah. You decided to dedicate your life to helping people. Why is that, Randy?
Well, I mean, God allowed me to go through what I went through for 20 plus years for a reason, I believe. And, he saved my life so many different times for a reason. And I believe that reason is to give back this gift of recovery that was given to me. They say you can't keep it unless you give it away. And I learned that very, very early in my recovery from my first sponsor, that you've got to recover out loud. You've got to share your message. You got to let people know that there's hope. And, that meant a lot to me. And, I never expected to be here, obviously, do any of us, but it is what it is. And I'm grateful for my journey. And, Scott, and you probably say the same thing. Looking back, I can't think of anything I would go change, or I wouldn't be here today talking to you.
Absolutely. With all the regrets and everything else, certainly I wish some things didn't happen, but I wouldn't want to miss the opportunity to live the life that I live today. So it was all done for a reason. Now you're very straightforward. You've written a book, which is an excellent book, by the way.
You mean this book right here?
Geez, you just happen to have it right there.
Yeah, I did. And the cool thing about this book is it was a 3-year labor of love, but it was also, my whole family had a platform in it, and it was kind of a healing process for the Grimes family. My children were part of it, my wife, even my mom to some degree. And, we're so happy with the way it turned out. The reviews have been great. There's something in there for everybody. There's a character in there for everybody. There's the angry person, the enabler, the codependent, the one that believes it's a moral failing and not a disease. I like to think I covered the whole gamut of emotions that go into addiction and what the family goes through, and of course what we go through as addicts and my spouse.
Yes, absolutely. The exact title of the book is
Off center,
Off Center.
off
And
center.
is that a
Obviously, I was a center when I played the game, but yeah, that's here's the book. And Coach Ditka wrote the foreword for me, and Coach Ditka has been a great advocate, not only of former players but of me and my journey. So I'm grateful that he took the time to have a part in this book, and he's just been awesome.
so your people can pick this up on Amazon or anywhere, I would
Yeah,
assume?
go to Off Center Randy Grimes, or just go to Randy Grimes and it'll pop up. Or you can go to offcenterthebook.com and it'll take you to the link that you need to buy it. And it's available paperback or Kindle, or electronic version, however you want to do it. But it's available. Buy the book. Buy the book.
Yes, please buy the book. And these kind of stories are very interesting, and you're very open and honest about your journey. Um, I think I think people know more about it now than maybe back then in the day when you were going through it. But addiction in professional sports, you know, it's a problem that needs help, isn't it?
Yeah, and it's a problem that's probably never going to go away, because nobody puts more pressure on themselves than players to get back out on the field. And front office people and management's putting pressure on the medical staff to get players back quicker than they probably should. So that mentality is never going to go away, because everybody wants to win. And but like I said, there's nobody puts more pressure on them than players do on themselves to get back out there. Because listen, if you're not out there in your position, somebody else is going to be, and you don't want that to happen.
Absolutely. We work with first responders here at Addiction Training Center at One Brother, One Sister, and it's a very similar thinking. Is like if I have a problem, I'll lose my seat on the truck, and you don't want to do that. You don't want to lose your position in the game or on the team, so you don't want to talk about things. Um,
Well, we
are
have that
you
mentality. We have that mentality that, especially as men, that we were raised with by our fathers, because that's how they were raised. And that's, you pick yourself up, dust yourself off, get back in the huddle, you keep your mouth shut. Big boys don't cry. That warrior mentality, and that keeps us, from raising our hands and asking for help. When in reality, it's okay to not be okay. It's okay to speak up. It's okay to ask for help.
The question is, Randy, though, when you're in those situations and back in your playing days, and when your addiction first really grabbed a hold of you, were you even aware it was a problem, or was it so much of that overriding thought of this is just what I do, just keep going, just keep going? Did you actually sit back and know something was wrong?
Yeah, I knew something was wrong, but I wasn't going to admit it. I looked at it more like a necessary evil. I mean, I'm getting it from the team doctor, so it must be okay. I'm getting it from the team trainer, so it must be all right. I'm getting it from teammates, or, we've got an open drug safe in the middle of the training room. I can just go get it myself if they don't give it to me. So I justified it because I wanted to be the best center. I wanted that next bat contract. I wanted to be all pro. I wanted to play the game forever. I wanted to feed my wife or my family. And so those are ways that I justified it. And what I looked at as a necessary evil was becoming a full-blown addiction that the last 2 years of my career developed to the point to where I was playing entire NFL football games in a blackout. I'd be home on the couch at night, 10, 11, 12 o'clock at night, and I'd be kind of starting to come around a little bit, and I'd be all beat up and bruised up and scratched up, fingernails all torn up, everything you are, dehydrated, everything you are after an NFL football game. And I didn't remember playing a single down. And I played every snap of every game somewhere in the country that day. And I'd have to wait and watch it the next day on film with everybody else. And I always played good. I say all the time, in the 8.5 years that this was going on, this necessary evil, not once did anybody ever say, Randy, why are you slurring your words? Or Randy, why are you nodding off in meetings? Or Randy, why are you late to practice every day? Or why are you the last to leave the building every night and pills are missing out of the drug safe? Nobody ever asked me that because I was always playing good. And if it ain't broke, don't fix it.
That must have been difficult to having those gaps in what is your dream to play NFL football and not remembering parts of that. That must have been difficult to deal with.
It brought on a lot of guilt and shame. It seems like God always put me in the right place at the right time, around the right people doing the right thing, football related. And, he blessed me with this great opportunity and great career. And, the last 2 years of it, I played in a blackout. But, that's the insanity of the disease. That's the chaos that it causes. And, that's what, Scott, I was willing to do it because I wanted to be the best. And I was
Right.
willing to do whatever I had to stay out on that field, like you talked about, because if I wasn't in my position, somebody else was. And like I said, I had so many enablers back then. It was so easy to justify. And I'd come home from practice or come home from a game, and I'd crash on the sofa or on the bed. That was not a red flag for my family because, I played in an era where we beat the hell out of each other all week long. And then hopefully there was enough left in the tank to play on Sunday. And so that was not a red flag to come home like that. And
yeah, you guys, I mean, let's just so everybody knows, you were past the leather helmet stage. You weren't back then, but
barely,
but just barely. But you also were playing in a time when they weren't paying as much attention to concussions and things like that. They were just barely aware of them at the time. So
yeah.
You got beat up pretty good.
Well, yeah, and I call it that old Bear Bryant mentality, where coaches used to have the philosophy of if you don't practice hard, you're not going to play hard. So we beat the hell out of each other in 110-degree heat in Tampa, all week long. And it always blew my mind why coaches would have that mentality, because we were their greatest commodity. We were their livelihood. If we don't win, they don't stay. But that was just the way it was back then.
Yeah.
And, it didn't change till many collective bargaining agreements later, where they finally started taking care of the players. And guys nowadays have fewer injuries as a result of practice, and they're having longer careers.
And that's a good thing, and we're very glad about that. If you don't mind me asking, Randy, because you're being so open, and I really appreciate it. I'm sure everybody else does too. And I understand you're in that zone when you're playing the game and during the season. During off season, was it different? Did you have to somehow come up with new justifications to live the way you were living, to live with your addiction? Or were you able to just kind of carry that through as part of the process?
I carried it through as part of the process. I justified the off-season use too. I still had aches and pains from the season before, I mean, let's face it, once I got started, I couldn't stop. I didn't have an off switch. But yeah, it just progressed and got worse every year. And, there were certain signs at the end. I mean, other than playing in a blackout, believe it or not, there was other signs like, I had a couple seizures, but I had those seizures right after surgery. So we all always thought it was surgery related. And I went in and I had all the testing done. And am I epileptic? Do I have a seizure disorder? And they put me on medication for that when I knew it had to do with benzo withdrawal, and that was before I retired.
So if you don't mind, what was the straw, the proverbial straw that broke the camel's back? I mean, it's almost like you said, you were blessed. You were able to still play even in your worst of moments, and you played well. So when did that end for you? When was it like, I can't do this anymore?
Oh, it was 20 plus years later, Scott. And I can remember I had 5 head coaches in 10 years. I had 6 different position coaches. I had 10 different quarterbacks and 3 different general managers. Tampa was a revolving door in the 80s and early 90s. And The only consistent thing about the Bucks back then was me at center. I seemed to survive all those changes. But the last coach that we had, Sam Weish, I remember him walking by me after the last game in '92, putting a hand on my shoulder and saying, "Randy, we won't be needing you out here anymore." And I had just gotten hurt halfway through that season, and I knew I couldn't go try out for anybody else. I didn't have it in me. My injury was too bad. And I remember just raking everything out of my locker into a black trash bag and walking out the back door. Randy Grimes, the football player, didn't exist anymore. And the reason I tell that story is because I already had this raging necessary evil going on. And now you throw on the fact that I don't have that uniform anymore, that I don't have that playbook, that I don't have that identity, I don't have that self-esteem that was brought on by being a professional athlete. And Scott, I struggled for the next 20 plus years. And even though I had some great jobs and homes and cars and all that, I couldn't stop. I couldn't stop the chaos. And the new normal in my life was ambulance rides and emergency room stays and hospital visits and detoxes and disappointing my kids and losing jobs and losing houses, having cars repoed. I couldn't stop the insanity. I literally couldn't stop it.
Wow. I mean, just, like you said, I mean, I know when you retire from something like that, whether it's sports, could be a first responder, could be military. We see it a lot with military. You're so defined by what you do that you're kind of like, you come out and you're like a blank slate. Well, who am I supposed to be now? And how much of who you became was all about the addiction at that point?
Well, it was all about that. It was
All of
how
it,
to
yeah.
contribute to society without that uniform. Unless I'm Randy Grimes, the football player, how am I good to anybody? What am I supposed to do? And literally, I'm putting the cart before the horse here, but literally, it wasn't until I got into professional treatment that I finally grieved the death of Randy Grimes, the football player. And it was like a real grieving process, like where I was really letting this person go. And man, I can remember going through that, and the therapist that helped me, but it was because of professional treatment. And you asked me when did the perfect storm was coming together for me in the summer or spring and summer of 2009, and I lost a real good friend that I played with out here in Tampa named Tom McHale. I played next to him for many years. He was my right guard. And he was doing the same thing I was doing, and that was self-medicating the injuries he got while he was with the Bucks. And one morning, he just didn't wake up, taking opiates and benzos. And man, that really got my attention. That was in late spring, and then my daughter had her first child, and she wouldn't let me come around him. So I couldn't come around my first grandchild because I wasn't fit to be around him. And I'd had another series of seizures as a result of withdrawal. Seems like as soon as I would ever withdraw from anything, I'd always have a seizure. So that was going on. And then my wife also realized that she was loving me to death. She felt like she needed to step back. And even though God had always promised her he was going to heal our family, she just couldn't sit by and watch me kill myself anymore. So that's when I finally put my hand up and asked for help. And I came into treatment September 22nd, 2009.
Was that the first time you'd actually made efforts to make that change? Or were there smaller efforts previous to that?
Yeah, there were smaller efforts where I thought maybe I could just go to detox and then I could control it when I got out of there. And I was kidding myself. And or I would do it to get somebody off my ass, or or get my wife off to make my kids proud. And I never really dealt with what made Randy do what Randy did. And you couldn't do it in a detox setting, of course. But, it wasn't until later when I finally had those consequences. That's one thing that all addicts and alcoholics respond to is consequences. And
Yeah.
when I finally had those boundaries and they finally held them and those consequences. And also, my wife at the end there, she was willing to make one more phone call for me. And, back then the NFL didn't have any resources for former players. They didn't really give a crap about you back then. But whoever she talked to that day when she called the NFL knew somebody who knew somebody. And that's how I got to West Palm Beach. on that September 22nd of 2009. And man, that was a life-changing event. And I tell the story when I pulled up in the car. I was so sick, man. I was so sick. I'll never forget that. And I remember leaning against the door of that car, and somebody opened it from the outside, and I just tumbled out like a sack of potatoes. And there was about another 30 feet to get through the door, and I crawled on all fours. And I always describe that night as finally receiving that gift of desperation. I finally had the surrender that it took to get over that, and or to start dealing with that addiction. And nobody helped me that night crawl through that door, and I'm glad they didn't.
It's kind of poetic in a sense that that this all started when you were, leaning down towards the ground with the ball, so you were almost in a crawling position when it all started, and when it ended, you were right back in that crawling position. So it's kind of ironic, right?
Yeah. And listen, I think I'm a pretty tough guy too. I've been in a lot of battles. You don't get to stay in the NFL for 10 years unless you're winning most of those battles. But I got to tell you, man, crawling through the door that night, it was the toughest thing that I ever did, but it was also the most rewarding, and that's even over the birth of my kids or my marriage or all the football accolades, because if I don't crawl through the door that night, it was all for nothing.
Well, you talked about a lot of loss and a lot of different things, and the loss of your career at that point where you were done, and then you're at a point where you're losing your family's trust and faith, and jobs and all the other things, and even some of your health. You lost some of all of those things, and you're saying you didn't even grieve the loss of that career, So that's a whole lot to deal with for somebody who is in very unstable or feeling very vulnerable. For people out there who are thinking like, that's just too much, I can't deal with all of this. Talk to me about how that felt to go through that and to look at your life for what it really was and to grieve all those moments. What was that like? And how did you make it through that?
Well, it's peeling back that onion, a layer at a time. Why did I do what I did? What was it that was fueling that? I was addicted. I couldn't stop taking the pills, but there was a reason why I didn't want to deal with life on life's terms. And, some of it was just the obsession to throw pills down, and other stuff was so I wouldn't remember that I wasn't Randy Grimes, the football player, anymore. So it was all kinds of stuff. But to go through that in a professional manner with a trained therapist, and really peel back those layers, regardless of what your issue is or what it is that makes you do what you did or do, there is hope and help. I mean, it can be solved. You can start working on it. There are tools available for just about anything. And I feel like in the last, and you too, but I feel like in the last almost 13 years, I've seen everything, and there's hope and help for anybody out there, regardless of what your issue is. And the cool thing now is, and you've witnessed this, is, there's more people out there recovering out loud. There's not that so much of that stigma that keeps people or keeps families from raising their hand and asking for help. And people are recovering out loud, not just celebrities and athletes, but, everybody. And I think that's such a cool thing that I've been able to watch that, especially progress over the last 5 or 6 years, where it's okay to not be okay.
Randy, I couldn't agree with you more, brother, because, I used to work in television and radio, and I was on TV and I was drunk and I was not in good shape. You were on national television and you were in a blackout. And if we weren't ashamed of living that way, why would we be ashamed of not living that way and not doing those things? I mean, I celebrate. Hey, times have changed. You can't go to a good Hollywood movie unless you're going to at least 3 rehabs. You know that, right? It's taking care of yourself is now a new in thing.
I can remember, every year I go to the Super Bowl and I talk about the work that I do with pro athletes in recovery and all that. But I remember the very first time I did that, I was down in Miami. I'd just gotten out of rehab. I'd gone to rehab in 2009. This was like end of January 2010. And I was sitting there with Conrad Dobler, and you know Conrad Dobler. He was the meanest guy, dirtiest guy I'd ever played in the NFL. You know,
Yeah.
he was my hero, my idol. You know, and I was sitting there and I was looking at this guy, and he didn't have any knee joints. He had his knees replaced, and they had gotten all infected. So they put these spacers in there that were supposed to heal everything and kind of clear up the infection. But I remember sitting there with him, and that's what he was talking about was his knees and everything he was going through. There wasn't any addiction problems, but I remember thinking, man, do I have the courage to talk about this? You know, and am I so ashamed that, you know, I can't go on the air and talk about what I've been through and what I put my family through? And man, the first time I did it, it just felt natural, and it felt so healing and releasing, you know. And I just kind of been off and running ever since then.
Well, Randy spent a lot of years trying to maintain a persona that wasn't real. So when we have an opportunity to let those things out and be our authentic selves, there is a big release. It's no more. I don't have to pretend anymore. I don't have to hide anymore.
Right.
But let's talk about, if you don't mind guiding this thing, 'cause I'd like to get to what you're doing today. But, like you said, you came in, you crawled through the doors, and you had all of this loss and all of these years of pain and suffering. When you started to find out about yourself and rediscover yourself and say, I'm not the football guy anymore. I'm not, and I'm not the addict anymore who's out there active. I'm not active addict. I'm not a football. When did you start to discover who you wanted to be, and how did you start to fill the new role in your life?
I didn't know. I can remember 2 weeks I was in treatment for 90 days, and I can remember being it was exactly 2 weeks. It was at 8:45 on a Wednesday morning. I was sitting at a picnic table in the middle of the rehab campus, and I was sobbing uncontrollably. I used to get up every morning and write in a spiral what I was going through, how I was feeling, what was going on around me. And for some reason that made me feel better, you know. But this particular morning, I was sobbing uncontrollably. I couldn't get a grip on myself because I couldn't get over, first of all, the obsession to throw pills down. And second of all, for the first time in 20 plus years, I was having to deal with all the huge wake of destruction that I left back with my family and reputation and finances, sober, life on life's terms, sober. And I hadn't done that in a long time. And it was like, Scott, while as this was going on, it was like somebody came up behind me and draped a warm quilt on my shoulders. And I say quilt because sitting at that picnic table that morning, I felt weight and warmth on my shoulders. And it was like not only was that obsession lifted off of me right there at that table, but I had this overwhelming sense of confidence that not only could I do this, but that I had to make it mean something. And that was kind of the birth of Pro Athletes in Recovery, because I knew there was a lot of guys out there just like me who were suffering in silence, and guys that I'd played with and against who were self-medicating their injuries and their loss of identity. And I knew they were out there, but for whatever reason, pride, ego, guilt, shame, they wouldn't raise their hand and ask for help. But usually it was because they didn't think there was any resources available. But I knew then I wanted to do something. I wanted to make everything that I put my family through mean something. I just didn't know what. And I still had a lot of work to do on myself. So
Yeah.
I just knew I wanted to help other former athletes. And, a year later, I finally did it. I formed this nonprofit, and I started working with the NFL. We started reaching out to guys, and they started coming out of the woodwork. Once they heard me tell my story, that they knew that there was resources available, the hands started going up left and right. And, over the last nearly 13 years, by the grace of God, I've been able to help hundreds and hundreds of former NFLers, and not just NFLers, but Major League Baseball got involved in the NHL and NBA, and pretty much every sport you can think of that has an organization that works with their former players, whether it's the Jockeys Guild or MMA or the PGA, it's Motorsport Safety Group, NASCAR, they
Wow.
have organizations that, we call them alumni associations, but a group that works with their former athletes.
Yeah, watch out. Next up will be the pickleballers there, my friend.
A lot of them look like they're already there. Yeah.
So when you go to the NFL and you start talking about doing these things, now you're talking about an organization that, although I don't want to, vilify them in any way, but their awareness of the issue seemed to be pushed under the rug for a lot of years. So have you seen a change in their thinking, and have they adopted this new idea? And we see they're taking better physical care. Are they starting to look more at the emotional and the psychological and the addictions?
Yeah, things have changed a lot. Every NFL team now has a professional therapist on site. The only bad thing about that, Scott, is that nobody wants to be seen knocking on that door or sitting
Yeah.
with them at the lunchroom table. So there's a lot we can do there. But I like to think that because of our advocacy over the last 12 and a half years, that a lot of practices that they used to do, they don't do anymore. There's no more off-label prescribing like they used to do with us. There's more accountability with the DEA and the different organizations that oversee narcotics and how they're dispensed. Doctors are more accountable, so I like to think that that's changed a lot. But I got to tell you, I still work with a lot of young athletes that are freshly out of the league or are out of their sport. And, it's still going on to some degree. And, that's what I talked about earlier, that war mentality. Players put pressure on themselves to get back out there. And other guys are willing to do, or girls are willing to do just what I was willing to do, stay out on that field and be the best.
I think that you actually hit the nail on the head with one of the issues that I think is important, which is people are afraid to knock on that door in front of other people and go in and talk, because we still have this stigma that you're not supposed to have problems. You're not supposed to be weak. You're not supposed to have any kind of mental health issues or anxiety or depression. And so
Big boys don't cry.
Big boys do, exactly. And and we see it in sports, we see it in first responders, we see it in our military, we see it in any heroic type adventures. And I assume it's all the same with the girls too, with the females athletes and everything. But I think maybe that's got to change. And I think being able to allow yourself to say that I'm hurting, I need help, and it's not a bad thing to say. It doesn't show weakness. Do you think we can ever get to that point, Randy, where we can normalize having those conversations and not have a stigma?
Well, I think we're getting closer. Me and you have been able to witness over the last 5 or 6 years, more and more people recovering out loud, and whether celebrities, athletes, or whatever, that more people are recovering out loud. Look at Simone Biles and look at Darren Waller. Look at some of these celebrities that are talking about that it's okay to not be okay. And I think that's what it takes. I think it takes people from all walks of life, because addiction is the great equalizer, as we know, and it brings us all to the same place. So regardless of who you are or what you did or what your identity is, I love the fact that people are talking about the fact that it's okay to not be okay, and they're recovering out loud, and that you see that stigma falling down just a little bit every time. You see people more willing to raise their hand. You see families more willing to make that call or have that uncomfortable conversation with somebody they suspect is in trouble. So it's getting better. Is it where it needs to be? No, but it's getting better, I think. And people
it's
like
nice to be
Aaron and what y'all do at ATC, that's helping too. That's helping huge. So it's pretty cool to watch it.
It's nice to be part of the solution and not part of the problem. It feels good.
Right.
So paint me a picture of Randy Grimes' life today, working in, not only being in recovery and finding a new way of life, but to really embrace it and live out loud and share. What is your life today? I mean, we went from didn't know who you were, didn't know what you were going to do, in pain, losing things, family not trusting you. Where are you today, brother?
Man, I'm accountable today. I'm the father that I'm supposed to be. I'm present and I'm present. and I'm the husband that I'm supposed to be. I'm the employee that I'm supposed to be. I'm the neighbor that I'm supposed to be. People ask me all the time what I miss most about football, and it's not the game. I don't miss being between those bleachers and under the lights. I miss the locker room. And that's what recovery has given me back, the opportunity to be with like-minded people that have laughed and cried and suffered and struggled like I have in those deep, dark places that addiction takes us. And yeah, recovery and meetings is my new locker room. And, I'm so grateful for that. And I just like to think that I'm everything that I always hoped I would be now.
Well, I can tell you just from personal experience of knowing you that you do light up a room with your energy, with your enthusiasm, and with your faith, because you're just one of those guys that, if I feel like I need somebody I can lean on, Randy's there. And my hat's off to you, brother, and everything that you do with the pro athletes in recovery and in writing the book Off Center. Please pick up a copy today, people. And you even work with treatment centers too. You're working with White Sands, I guess, right?
White Sands, right. So that's where my athlete program is, here in White Sands in Plant City. We've got a location there in Hyde Park in Tampa and down in Fort Myers. So yeah, I'm very grateful for the support they give me, and everything that happens there with the athletes. But sometimes, Scott, I box myself in and talk only about athletes when we work with everybody. And I want to make that clear that addiction happens to everybody. And although I'm a former athlete and that was my niche early, I want people to know that I'm here for anybody who's looking to quit suffering from this disease.
Yeah, I mean, yours was certainly a little bit more in the public eye about the struggle of going from the NFL to finding your way through your addiction. But everybody does that. We all have to grieve the person that we used to be, and we've all lost quite a bit. So the fact that you do what you do is just a blessing, my friend. And
Thank you.
I look forward to us doing more things together. You're a great guy. I do have to ask one football question though.
Okay.
I do have to ask one. I working in TV and radio, I've met a lot of people, celebrities and people from movies and TV. I've only been intimidated once, like really kind of jaw hit the ground. It was the first time I ever met Jim Brown, the football player.
Oh, yeah.
It just like, for some reason, his presence was both terrifying and exciting at the same time. And you know what I'm talking about, that look that he got. It was years ago. With all the people that you've played with and all the people that you met, has there ever been, can you remember any time when you actually kind of stood up and says, I can't believe I'm playing with this guy?
Oh, that happened a lot, especially my rookie year. I remember
Well, yeah.
first training camp I was at with the Bucks. I had a locker next to Leroy Selman, and I couldn't believe that I was having these deep conversations with Leroy. And the first thing I learned from Leroy was that football was no longer a game; now it was a job. And the second thing I learned from Leroy was you do whatever you have to stay on the field. My first start, my rookie year, was against Randy White in Texas Stadium in front of all my friends and all my family, and all my Baylor teammates were there. I grew up a lot that day. You either grow up or you go home, So, yeah, I mean, I didn't have any Sundays off. Everybody in the NFL is good. And, I was just amazed that they were paying me to play a game that I probably would have gladly played for free.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Randy, anything else you want to wrap this up with? First, I hope you'll take some time and do this again with me.
Anytime.
Yeah, it's fantastic. It's always good to see you. Anything coming up or anything you want to talk about before we take off?
No, just go buy the book, go to offcenterthebook.com, or find me at Amazon, Randy Grimes Off Center. I'm on all the social media platforms. If you can't find me, you're not looking very hard. And of course, White Sands here in Tampa, the number one treatment center the last 2 years in a row. There's a reason why.
So if anybody wants to get questions or go tour, they can always call White Sands and they can get more information from them, obviously.
And my website is proathletesinrecovery.org. You can always get in touch with me there. Go check that out and see the work that we're doing at Pro Athletes in Recovery.
Randy, thank you again, my friend. It's an absolute pleasure.
Oh, thank you very much. I'm honored.
I'm just going to set you in the back for a minute. Now, just hang on. I'll be right back with you. All right, so we were talking to Randy Grimes, the NFL player from the Tampa Bay Bucks, who went on to defeat his addictions and build a life that is just absolutely incredible. Read his story, Off Center. You can pick it up on Amazon, and certainly check him out, Pro Athletes in Recovery. For now, I want to thank everybody for watching. My name is Scott Jones. We'll catch you next time right here in Spotlight on Addiction and Recovery.